good talks to you today. I'm quite looking forward to hearing from them. I'll start off with a bit of an overview of the project, and then we can go through case studies, Cortex in use in various production scenarios, and then I'll wrap things up again. My bit's going to be probably a bit boring, but hopefully we'll set up some of the kind of terminology and the basics of the project itself so that other people can dive straight into the more interesting stuff. So Cortex is it's a framework of C++ libraries and Python modules, which is hopefully sort of broadly applicable to a lot of different development for production. To be broadly applicable, it needs to be usable in different third-party applications. So that's quite a key part of the framework. This kind of forms the basis of the whole magnification engine. We've been developing it for 5 years nearly now, and recently started collaborating with Doxby and some other companies in this development. And as it's kind of so broadly used in our pipeline, it's really important to us that it's well tested. So unit testing is taken quite seriously, and it's something that is quite important to us. So that sort of thing worries me. Why not? It's open source. We're using the BSD license, which is pretty much what everyone else is using for visual effects projects. Basically means you can do what you want with it, but just don't blame us if it goes wrong. And because it's open source, I'd like to think it's a good opportunity to collaborate, and you'll see some sort of the seeds of collaboration later in the talks. I'm just going to do a quick kind of overview of the basic structure of the library. How to use that effect, it was really cool. So at the sort of lowest level, we're building things in C++ on top of the SVL, Boost, and then the IMath libraries that are part of the OpenEXL framework. And we're kind of extending the maths with our own stuff in the same vein as IMath. So stuff in there for splines, and KD trees, and circle harmonics, and point distributions, and whatnot. And then extending stuff like Boost with things for dealing with file sequences, and all that kind of stuff. And kind of one layer up from that, we've got these data classes, which are essentially wrappers around basic data types from the STL, but adding quite nice features like lazy copy on the right and stuff. So you can copy a lot of these objects and throw them around without really paying for them. And then from that, we build geometric primitives which pretty much match the render map spec in terms of what primitive is. So a mesh has got topology, which is specified in the same way as it would be for render mode, and then primitive variables added around. Then we've kind of got a native I/O framework as part of Cortex, which is all based around hierarchy of random access, kind of leaf nodes. And then on top of that, the primitives and all other objects in Cortex can be serialized in and out of that and accessed randomly. And then there's I/O for loads of third-party formats like PTCs and PDCs and TIFFs and PNGs and so on. And one level up from that, start seeing things that we might use to build user tools. And we'll dive into these in more detail shortly. And obviously, once you've got some user tools, you need to present them to the user. So then we have place layers to make that available in various applications. And then wrapping that all up is Python bindings. So pretty much everything in the library you can use from Python, and that's really important to us in terms of getting things done quickly in production and turning things around. And it's also the basis of all the unit testing. So we'll now visit that sort of top level of that little pyramid. So we're talking about parameters quite a lot. They're really just a sort of formal way of describing the input to a process and sort of performing some validation on that input so that once it arrives in that process, you don't have to worry too much about it being correct. So you can make a file name parameter say this file must exist, and by the time it's in the process, you don't have to do all that kind of boilerplate checking and things. The values for a parameter is always a native Cortex type, and we'll see later how we convert between that and then the application format. So here's some C++ code, just declaring some parameters. So it's just asking for a mesh up top, and then a float, and some d2f, some string, and so on. And the equivalent code in Python is pretty much identical. So the Python bindings aim to really mirror the C++ very directly. So if you know one side of the API, you know the other as well. It's not like something in Maya where there's like a C++ API and a very different Python API. So those parameters there can then be represented in different host applications. So here they're mapped onto attributes on a node in Maya. Here they're mapped onto parameters on a node in Houdini. And here you might just read from a command line and get the values in that as well. So having these inputs, we need some kind of process to actually input them into. So the first of these is ops, which really are just glorified functions. They use parameters to define their inputs, and then when you want the output, you can ask for it, and it'll get filled into this output parameter. So a huge part of Cortex is all implemented in these ops. You can implement them in Python or C++, and it doesn't matter which one you choose, you can still use the Python ops from C++ and vice versa. So examples from our pipeline would be there are ops to build the file system structure, where the jobs and shots. There are ops for doing effects work in Houdini. There's ops that we use during rendering. So it kind of covers the length and breadth of the pipeline. So because we can host parameters in host applications, we can host ops as well. So here you see an op being hosted and plugged into the hypergraph. This op just computes a point distribution on a mesh. So it's taking a Maya mesh, which is being converted into Cortex data. The op works on that, makes a point distribution, and outputs it again. We can do exactly the same with Houdini, in pretty much the same vein. So that's ops. Next thing at the top of that pyramid was procedurals. So when we're talking about procedurals, we're talking about procedural geometry generation, so deferred geometry generation at render time. The idea being that you don't want to give the renderer the whole scene up front because it's too expensive, so you just give it a black box and it opens it and asks you for the contents at some point, which is convenient for them. Usually if you're writing procedural for RenderMan, say, you'd be making direct calls to the RenderMan interface when you're generating the geometry, but Cortex has this kind of abstraction layer, so you talk to this abstract renderer concept, and then it's translated to RenderMan at the back end or OpenGL at the moment. We hope to be able to kind of add additional backends or something. And those can be implemented in Python or C++ as well, it doesn't matter. So here's a look at a simple procedural, kind of almost uselessly simple. It's got to implement these two methods. One is to return a bounding box. So this one should be pretty quick. The args parameter there is the contents of the parameters which have been validated. So it's just looping over a bunch of files it finds in the directory and computing their bounding box. And then in the render method, it's doing the same thing. It's loading the objects from the directory and then passing them to the renderer. Telling the renderer what name it has. So here's that hosted in Maya. It's just a bounding box, which obviously isn't great. So you can turn on the GL preview and then the procedural starts being executed using the GL backend. And we're just loading a simple animation cache here. One of the painful things we found with procedurals early on was that because it's a black box, you can't really interact with it in Maya. So we've and some length, so that we actually implement each sub-object in the procedural as a Maya component, so they can be selected. And then the procedural node itself can output the transforms and bounding boxes for each sub-object. So you can build locators and things like that, so you can have lights following objects and stuff like that. So although it's sort of a black box initially, you can kind of query these things in Maya. Turns out to be quite useful.
Okay, so everything John's gone over so far is all included in the open source part, which is Cortex, and some of the stuff in here is proprietary to Image Engine, but it's all built on Cortex. So basically the hardest parts of everything we do goes into Cortex, and then the studio specific parts go into proprietary things. So for our lighting and rendering pipeline Image Engine, we light in Maya and we render in 3D. We have delayed mode archives and ribs that are generated using 3D Light's Maya plugin. The geometry is procedurals, and the shading and lighting are all custom to us. So the fact that we're in Maya for lighting is basically for UI and familiarity with artists' expectations. And they can take native Maya lights and interact with our lights and everything like that too. And the lights derive from parameterized objects also, so they're quite similar to ops, just a little bit different. And then, so this is how we do, just a quick overview of how we do our geocaching. COBS is a Cortex object file, and FIO is a file index IO file. Generally, we store our models as COBS, one per shape. The models in anim are cached from Maya using our asset management system, which is also built on Cortex, that we don't talk about in the talk much. Generally, we're doing vertex and transform caches, but you could cache any data you wanted as long as it's on there. The integration with Houdini, which has all come along in the last year or year and a half maybe, also works quite well, and we're publishing COBS from there and anim caches now also. And then I guess one of the important things about that is that we have this interpolated cache as part of Cortex, so we can efficiently load those caches and interpolate and fake subframe data if we don't have it. And procedurals are loaded in by lighters with a geo preview in Maya, and then rendered from there through the ribs. Yeah, I guess that's it. So then John showed you a simple procedural real quick. In practice, we use much more complicated ones, so we built a modular procedural system. And the basis behind this is these class parameters and class vector parameters, which are part of Cortex. Basically, they're a way of embedding parameters from dynamically loaded classes that could be C++ or Python classes. So the biggest, or a good example of how we use them are for loading co-shaders and its parameters and building up a shading system. Yeah, so then we have this stack of modifiers basically in our procedural. We define the geometry first and then have a stack of modifiers that does something to it, like shader assignments, add animation, change attributes, things like that. And there's so this is a video, and we're kind of trying to use a Photoshop metaphor for our later shaded system. This is kind of a video of how a looked-at artist might start up. So just adding a shader, most of which we use layered shaders for. I think in the beginning there he showed a little bit of asset linking. I think he's going to go ahead at some point and add a filter for a couple of shapes. So we only want the shader to apply to the hands there. You just add those from selection by shaping. He's going to add, you can diffuse the specular, a couple of different things, and maybe a couple of different layers, and one could be skin and one could be dirt. And yeah, I guess one thing to point out is this UI on the side there, that's all out-of-the-box Cortex UI. Some of the icons, I think, are specific to us, but you can make your own icons if you like. But and all of those parameter types are supported. So as long as you defined, this is what my diffuse does, these are the parameters for it, then you would get the UI. Some parameters. And I guess one other thing I didn't mention yet is he's going to, at some point in this video, override a certain parameter for a certain shape, and that's all. The procedural doesn't have to really know that that's happening per se. It just kind of gets substituted. The value gets substituted at the right time. And we do a lot of string substitution on our paths there, and paths to texture files and things. Just with dictionary substitution for like asset name and version and variation. So this is a video about our lights. It's just kind of showing a little bit how they're different from Maya lights. So you've got the same exact UI on the side there because it all derives from parameterize, and they use the parameters. So here we have a little ramp affecting how the light affects, how the light acts. Then there's like a little fall-off disk we can have. And change the intensity, the disk gets bigger. Color. So then some other little bits and bobs that we have. There's a simple subsurface algorithm included with Cortex. And we do our preview rendering to a socket display hosted in Nuke, so you can kind of net render or local render your rims and get the rendering live into a display in Nuke, just for faster around for doing things. We have a spherical harmonic implementation included in Cortex, which we try to use for a number of things, including spherical harmonic lighting, for trying to bake shadows and things like that. There's a medium cut algorithm for dome lighting as well, and environment convolution, and there's lots of other different things.
I'm going to give like a brief overview of Dr. D Studios and just thoughts on Happy Feet 2, why we chose Cortex, show some initial results that we got during prototyping, then go more into how we actually tried to design the crowd system, then show the integration of the crowd system into Maya, Houdini, and a little bit of free light rendering, and some conclusions. Then afterwards on how Cortex basically enabled us to do all these different things. Dr. D Studios is a relatively new studio. It was founded by and is owned by George Miller, Doug Mitchell, KMM. And it's a digital production studio based in Sydney with its first project, hopefully many more to come, being Happy Feet 2. Just when it comes to the task, Happy Feet 2 crowds that we've got to deal with, we have roughly 600 plus crowd shots in the movie with 15 unique character types. Crowds are not just a background noise effect. Crowds are in the foreground, midground, and background, directly around hero characters, everything with the name, and interacting with them as well. We had 8 months of dev time with roughly 3 developers allocated, and then 6 months, initially 6 months short production time with an average of 18 months. We're actually still going at the moment. So why we chose Cortex? Initially, when we just looked at the requirements, we have an awful lot of different departments, and at Dr. D, we're sort of coming to the 600 plus people at the moment. And so we've got animation, lensing, and stereo working mostly in Maya, mocap and motion editing using Nuance and a bit of Motion Builder. fun layout, effects, lighting, all using Houdini, rendering standard 3D light. And crowds had basically to interact with any of these stages, any part of the pipeline. So there was the question, okay, where's the crowd system running in? Is it Maya? Is it Houdini? Is it something standalone with Python layer? How do we approach that? So the initial plan, seeing that we were confronted with this kind of problem, was to come up with a base structure that kind of looks like that, with a core C++ layer, then a hopefully thin interface layer of Python and C++, and then a host for the crowd system in Maya, Houdini, 3D Python. Luckily, just when evaluating sort of the different options, which were basically, do we take something that might already provide a base structure like that, or do we develop it from scratch? We spent some time evaluating Cortex and found that because its structure mirrors very much what we were after, that we'd go for that as well. And so initially we started with a bit of prototyping just to see if the different things that we needed to do actually could be achieved in Cortex. And this is just a basic character generation pipeline. The whole crowd system is just based on, it's a standard crowd system that's based on skeletal animation, which is skinned at render time. So what we did, we just initially just used the existing Cortex functionality and just exported the data from Maya, where we had our initial assets, into just a compound data structure, which is basically like a hierarchical data structure that you can assemble at runtime in C++ or in Python. That is a very handy container that you can just use to build any sort of data structure that you want, and very handy for prototyping. And then just use the Python procedure to test and preview our character animation process. Here, some initial results. Here we've got elephant seals swimming, and we just to generate that, I think it's 20, 30 lines of Python code, just to plug it all together. Then there's a test for just initial crowd layout rendering, which is just a layout that was generated with a previous system, exported via Python into a compound data structure, and then at render time just instance some static geometry on it. All that stuff still done in Maya at the time, because we represent animation just as an array of matrices that's sort of changing over time, and as we got direct access to the matrices, we just could write small little deformers, little playing around. It's kind of fun. And also, just as a prototype, worked up the procedural a little bit more to test things like lighting, motion blur, attaching other types of geometry to it. And all that stuff is basically just initially to sort of prove the point that Cortex was actually able to sort of deliver on all the requirements that we had. And it was also just to get to grips with the problem and actually find out what we actually needed to do and how to build the system. And we basically, after these testings, we sort of came to the conclusion that we wanted to keep the layouts, the crowd system really, really simple. It's just a layout system for pre-created skeletal animation data that is scanned on demand. It's just a mass animation instancing system with only very limited motion blending no motion synthesis at all, and the focus was very much on fast manual control rather than simulation. So it's got nothing really to do with a system like Massive, but it could integrate very well with a system like Massive. And sort of the base idea is just that we have a crowd call sheet, which basically represents and associates characters with animations and terrains. So it's nothing else than a lookup table that for each character has a little entry, and then it says, okay, it's this kind of character with this animation, this transform on it, and adapt to this terrain. That's basically all it is. And then just looking at how we wanted to set the whole thing up. We decided on a Maya-based interface for most layout work, and then Houdini for procedural crowd effects, like swarms and frogs. And our initial prototypes were slow. We sort of moved them into either Cortex-dependent C++ libraries, or we submitted them directly to Cortex, where applicable, and looked into the modularization of functionality into Python function set and ops. And here's some example of our Maya layout workflow. We basically have Cortex op networks for procedural layout modification, and then build a custom Maya MPX surface shape for manual editing and display, where each crowd character actually matches to a component. And so this is just an example of how a crowd artist would work with this. This are around 100 unique animations. We get most of our animation from mocap department, and we're sort of in a very fortunate situation that we just get massive amounts of animations to play with, sometimes on a per shot basis. And you can see here you can move individual characters around, do some sort of modifications. This basically is a custom system, but in the back end, it's all based on Cortex. But it's hosted in Maya. It's just some sort of layout operation that you can do. We use this kind of workflow more for the close-up shots, where you actually need a lot of manual control. And let's see. So there's duplication. All the while, the whole file system and file I/O is just based on the standard Cortex function set for speeding up the workflow. We use the IU cache, which is also included in Cortex. Basically just a simple caching mechanism. Maybe I just jump one forward. All it does is copy a few more of these guys. An example of how to work with terrains. So you can see we can get a sizable amount of characters on the screen using Cortex as a backend. These are around 2,000 characters. In practice, we are nearly doing all the shot work without actually having to do any render pass at all. We just go for OpenGL renderer, and also have the director directly improve on this sort of preview, which turns out nicely because we don't need to use any render farm resources. So here, the example of the simple terrain adaptation, and just so you see how that network basically generated it. What you see is an IE op holder node, which maybe holds the ops that John was talking about beforehand. We host, it's just a little Python snippet in this piece of code, then pass that to a call sheet terrain node, which adds the terrain with specific parameters to the call sheet, and then pipes it through a small converter node into our custom MPX service shape, which then evaluates the whole call sheet for this. And here's some examples of procedural type of layouting. Sort of built a custom UI, because working with lots of ops in the Maya hypergraph is not really that intuitive, so we built a little tab-based layout that would host the parameters and parameter views. So you can add different types of effects. So here we're seeing is just a relax effect on the crowd. The backend is using the KV tree that also comes with Cortex to the simple point repulsion based layouting operation. And so this sort of like another example of something that we do quite often, which is control just time offsets procedurally. This just using the spatial noise function. And what we actually have there is lots of little penguins turning around just in a coordinated time. When it comes to the effects integration of crowds, when we initially started using Cortex, Houdini was not supported yet, but Cortex already provided a framework that sort of made it easy to extend. So we had Dan Mefford, one of our developers, look into adding support for hosting ops and procedurals in Houdini, and all that work has been greatly enhanced, and with the help of the image engine as well. So what we're doing, we're building little op networks and reuse exactly the same ops that we've already written in Maya. Here's just a quick example. We also have a custom GL viewer for our crowds in Houdini, but the interesting things are the op holders that allow you to do the different kinds of operation. So for example, here we load a call sheet, set a render scale because of our scale is different in different applications. And then once that is done, we can pipe our call sheet data into different kinds of op. For example, one that we frequently use for effects integration is the call sheet to meshes op, which basically executes the render time skinning code to generate a mesh. What you're seeing now is the preview of that mesh as a mesh primitive in Cortex. Then that is passed through the Cortex to Houdini converter to actually make proper Houdini geometry out of that. And once we have proper Houdini geometry, we can just do anything that we want with it that we can sort of do in Houdini. This is sort of the other way around, instead of extracting data from from Cortex and putting it into Houdini. We can also go the other way around. Here we just have a small example that just has a deforming geometry in Houdini. We extract the root joints of all the characters in our layout from through a Cortex up, put that into a Cortex pointer primitive, and then put that into a node which is called point-to-call sheet, which matches point primitive parameters back into our call sheet, which is then evaluated through our custom viewer using Cortex functionality in the backend. And the last thing that's sort of missing is the crowd lighting and rendering workflow, for which we use Houdini, and we use just a nested Python procedural to distribute the crowd rendering load, and for rendering we are emulating the hero rendering pipeline. We reuse all geometry, all shaders, all foregrounds, everything that the hero pipeline gives to us, and inject it procedurally using the Python procedural in Cortex. It's just a small character test for some of the characters that we have. And this is sort of an overview of that nested procedural. It's a fairly common thing for programming, this kind of structure. And how the render network looks, it's more the left-hand side. Basically, load a call sheet, then I'm able to convert it to points. We are able to set rendering tweaks, which we just use the standard Maya point modification, setting point attributes, modifying point attributes, and to set rendering tweaks like, do we hide a character, do we enable subdiff for a specific LD for specific character types, do we assign a specific shader to a specific character. So we just build a rendering for this. And this is sort of just an example output of optimal rendering procedural. Unfortunately, I can't show any actually of the big crowd shots in the movie because the movie isn't allowed yet. But in practice, the pure rendering side of things has not been shown to be any problems. So some modification we can easily put through 150,000, 200,000 characters, and we have some shots with 600, 700,000. Yeah. Right so far. So some conclusion: Cortex sort of proven to be a flexible and especially TD-friendly base for the effect feature animation software development. TD-friendly mostly through its Python binding. So we've got TDs, once they know the base structures, happily developing their own little ops to sort of solve their workflow problems. And we found it well suited for rapid prototyping due to its modular nature and the pre-existing functionality. And it was really easy to reuse and exchange data and functionality across multiple hosts, which was important to us. And it gives that ability sort of gives us the possibility to build workflows that enable artists to benefit from the strengths of their preferred host applications.
Basically, we decided for Twilight Eclipse, I guess that was 2 years ago, to make our own first system. We kind of evaluated what was out there at the time and decided to just develop our own. Tom Callan did a lot of work on a lot of aspects of it, actually. I don't look at this anymore, unfortunately. Back to London. So, basically, our first system is a component of the standard procedural. So, like you saw before, you're just adding modifiers to the procedural. One of the modifiers could be the first system. It's implemented pretty much entirely in C++. The UI is all in Python. And it's similar. It uses most of the parameter UI that you saw before. It's multi-threaded. One of the big things about that is, so we were on Cortex major version 4 at the time. Now we're on 6. So during 4, we realized all the problems with multi-threading. We hadn't really tried to use the libraries for that before, and so we learned a lot about it. And then in Cortex 5, pretty much made all the necessary changes to make that actually work. So Cortex 5 and 6 are safe and reliable for multi-threading. We grew them in Light and Maya, but the little star there is to say, just like we're letting rendering pipeline, everything's custom. We are using Maya Paint during the grooming, but it's the only bit of Maya that we use for it. Yeah, so I guess the other thing to mention is that our first system is a tree of procedurals. So like Carson was saying, he has nested procedurals for the crowds. It's the same idea. And the main reasons for that were to keep memories down at render time and provide parallelism during interactive grooming, as well as so you can groom locally and not have to update the whole core system. You just get those little patch procedurals. So the main components, first we seed with the point distribution, seed the mesh, and then we grow. Those are just straight curves stored in the curves primitive, Cortex curves primitive, and then we groom. So grooming is just adding a series of for modifiers. So there's a couple examples down there. It's mutator, Frizzomatic, clumper, and curve modifier. So curve modifier would be like you build one Maya spline and then let that drive the shape of your hair. The clumping uses KD trees that Carson briefly mentioned, so that's in Cortex as well. And curve evaluators figure out what to do and find nearest neighbors and things like that. And then we kind of have a bit of advanced clumping using a curve tracer, which is part of Cortex. So you paint a ribbon basically, and then narrow that to a thin band and clump to the ribbon instead of to a single hair. So our textures, like I said, we use Maya Paint, and then we use the SX API of 3Delight, which provides texture inputs to all the grooming operations. And it allows us to use exactly the same layer shading that we saw earlier to provide textures in the first system. And we've wrapped up the SX API a bit so that it integrates with Cortex, and there's Python bindings and things like that. And so that it handles shader descriptions and Cortex style output. So this is a little video John made pretty quickly. Our groomer just had a baby, so we couldn't get a real groomer to make a video. So he's got the seeds there. He just upped the density of the point distribution. He just turned on the grower. And he's going to add some modifiers. And so again, this is just like the procedurals and the ops that you saw before. Like all those curves are not geo in Maya. That's just the GL display of the Cortex curves primitive. And the UI is all the same as the procedural that you saw before. So here he's about to start painting a texture. It controls the direction of the groom. Added clumping. There's not very many clumps right now. So the clumping is basically a mini first system embedded there that the regular first system will try to grow towards. So now it's turned up the density of that mini first system, and then it's got a lot of clumps. And the ribbon clumper I was talking about before, that we kind of needed that to get the effect on the necks of the wolves. You'll see some final shots of it later. And we've since, at the time of Twilight Eclipse, we didn't have the modular concept yet because we didn't have class parameters and class vector parameters. So it required a lot more, like in order to look at a wolf, you had to have the programmer sitting right next to the look dev guy and giving him everything he needs. But now it's a lot easier for look dev artists to build up the systems themselves. That's the ribbon clumping I was speaking. also use this for parting lines and things like that. And we have since in things we're not allowed to show yet, use this for human hair and things like that. Okay, so then for dynamics, basically we're seed, grow, groom, all in the system in Maya there. And then since we have this nice point distribution, which is based on the SIGGRAPH paper from a few years ago, I always forget the name of it. Yeah, recursive line tiles for real-time blue lines. So all you got to do to get guide hairs for the sim is lower the density of your first system, and then you still have exactly evenly distributed hair. So we do that, we save it to a Cortex object file, and then initially we were doing sims in Maya using MyHair, and then more recently we're doing them in Houdini, now that we have the host layer in Houdini. So we just bring it into Houdini, simulate it as wires, and then export basically an anim cache of per point motion vectors. So we're doing all the processing at caching time, and then bring it back into the first system in the procedural, and you got a dynamics modifier which just takes a cache and then interpolates those motion vectors onto the high density groom using your nearest neighbor queries based on the root positions and using a KD tree in Cortex. So I guess the good thing like that applying this is pretty fast because the root positions are all predetermined based on a reference frame. You don't have to do any of the KD lookup. You do it once, and then the rest of the animation is already done. You're just interpreting. So here's on the left there is without dynamics, and on the right is with dynamics. Here's some hair. We use this for a digidouble in the film. That kind of came at us at the last minute. We had to throw that together in like a week or two. The ability to do anything but short fur. And that's what we got out of it. And it worked out for the shots we needed for them. So that, yeah, a big point to talk about is the shading. So we're using the Martian hair model implemented by Lucio Motor, who's sitting over there. And that's all in Cortex as well. There's a render van and OpenGL implementation. We experimented with spherical harmonics, but decided not to go with it because the supervisors didn't like it. And this is going to be a video of the OpenGL of the Martian hair model. And this procedural right here is an example on the wiki, so there's no custom code in this video. You just go, if you have Cortex built, you can download that Python example. It's obviously way slower than a real first system, and it's not true procedurals. It shows you what you can do, and you can throw lights in, and have it react with the hair, and change the parameters. This is not my music, by the way. So there's just moving a mile light around and having an effect for changing some values, and then it's going to go and plug in a different mesh into the different system. So in Maya, this is a bit cumbersome. Obviously, you have to use the connection editor. It's kind of annoying. You can script it in the video. In Houdini, any primitives like that, like mesh primitives, curve primitives, those are all just going to be inputs and stops. So it would be the normal method. You just plug and go. And then here's an early walk cycle. This is basically before we fly these shots, but when we were handing the first system over to Argus. Here's some breakdowns.
Just a quick overview why we use Cortex to develop tools, how to write a tool with Cortex, how to build tools against Cortex, and how to deploy the tools. I'm going to do some. why use Cortex? Well, because of all the elements that we already talked about beforehand, except the multiple applications. And important, it has a unified plugin interface that gives you parameters, a data pricing mechanism, and Python scriptability. And to write a plugin, all you need to do in the first instance is include the Cortex headers, the ones you need, and just then write your tool as a modular component. For example, here we inherit from Cortex op, do all the necessary declarations, and then basically implement the do operation method that you see. For building, against Cortex, well, you have to use the same compiler, same libraries, and then the same application that you want to go for. Then added package config support to Cortex, so that you can, if you build with CMake, can simply check for the modules and then use the Cortex include deals, library deals, and the Cortex libraries. For deploying, all you need to do is basically set the respective environment variables for the new application. And if you've got a C++ plugin, add an op stub into the plugins folder. Basically, just a small, simple Python script to refer back to your C++. And here, an example. This Cortex Ocean. It's a port of the Houdini Ocean toolkit to Cortex, and then ported the Houdini Ocean toolkit by Drew Whitehouse to Cortex and implemented it as a Cortex modifier op. Modifier op is derived off of a generalized op, and it modifies geometry. Basically declared it like this, and then implemented the modify function. This is basically the CMake to build and deploy it. And it's just an example how it works. Basically, generate a grid in Houdini, put down a Cortex op, and then use the op to modify the geometry. If any of you have worked with the Ocean toolkit, you're probably aware of all the things that you can do with it. Now, hosting an application in Houdini that's already part of Houdini itself is that might seem a bit counterintuitive, but the nice thing is that once it's implemented as a Cortex op, we automatically get we are automatically able to run it unmodified in any other Cortex host. So on the site you see Nuke, Maya, Frito-Lite, and Houdini basically all producing exactly the same output without having to modify any of the plugin code itself. He's put this example online on GitHub, Cortex Ocean, so it's open source for you to download and use as an inspiration as well. Another example, Crumbs, a little very simple particle system implemented in C++ CUDA and hosted in full Cortex. What it's doing is generating a known its own new type data derived from IE-core type data, and then pass that through Cortex op networks. So Sorry, I'm a bit quick, but I was too long on my other presentation. Speed up now. Basically has the different crumbs type, the data, and then the ops. One that takes the geometry through Cortex, puts it on the GPU, comes out, that gets the geo information from the GPU, goes back into Cortex, and the solver, which just on the GPU controls the simulation. And the whole system runs unmodified in any of the Cortex hosts. Got a little example here. It's not world's best particle system, but it's just more as a sort of an example of how easy you can write basic platform independent or host platform independent code, and then use it across multiple applications, and don't have to worry about common things like writing parameter interfaces and data parsing mechanisms and stuff. Just putting in the output of a scatter result, and then puts the output of the op chain back into a copy node, just to get little bolts. Also can do a bit of interaction with each other. And as the last example, he basically did a binding to Python, and that's basically all he had to define to bind these functionalities using iCore Python together with Boost Python. And once that was done, just write this little piece of Python code, which, as an example, just loads BGO, applies the free ops, and then saves all the points as well. And this way you can do operation just through Python, and can save your money on licenses. You would normally need to run it in any other host application. And this example will be released as open source soon as well. So just a summary why I use Cortex. It's easy to develop plugins outside of application constraints. It's straightforward to build and deploy against Cortex. And the Cortex API is stable across major versions of
We recently added the new coast Cortex. We did a show a little while back where we were rendering particles in using 3-line. We wrote the integration for that. It's quite early days. It's not the best tested code yet, but we have used it on the show. It's graceful. We haven't got anything in Cortex which actually lets you render the procedures, and you can host them and you can preview them in the geo renderer, but there's nothing in Cortex to let you render them. But Paolo can tell you how that's possible.
Thanks, Tom, for the presentation and for inviting us. So, yeah, it's fine. Okay, so Cortex in AtomGraph. Hello, rocket-propelled cows. So when we started developing AtomGraph on Jupiter, we had to take some decision on what data should we put inside Node. And we obviously were looking at something more interesting than plain simple geometry. So we wanted to get into Nuke some kind of assets. And more specifically, Rig, Alembic, ABC, Houdini BGL, GeoBGL, and of course Cortex procedurals. RIB. Of course, RIB plays a central role in our pipeline because our rocket engine is the amazing 3D renderer, and all our data becomes array data. So, besides RIB allows us to virtually load basically anything: shaders, lights, cameras, donuts. We can get RIB from any RIB exporter, and we support out-of-the-box 3D Maya, Softimage, and linear renderman ROPs. So ABC, the second one. Being also an arbitrary data container is attractive for our purposes, so we decided to support it instead of supporting other closed developed formats such as FPS. Geos. We like Houdini a lot. We originally used this open source GPD library, but there are several limitations, so we just basically developed our own ones to overcome this. So let's get into Cortex. So when Image Engine started using AtomCraft in 2010 for this SSX Deadly Descent Supercruise No-Board trailer, and probably after a lot of research in Whistler by John, well, we started looking into procedurals because, well, I mean, they are cool operators, as the guy showed until now, that can be visualized in different contexts, different applications too. So, you know, OpenGL Renderman and Maya Houdini Nook in this case. And procedurals can be written in either Python or C++. Anyway, we did this also because we want to make it attractive for them and for other people. So anyway, yes, last but not least, we are very fond of open source as contributors and users, so it's always a good ethical choice. That's also why we do it. So all this leads to Atom Cortex, the gated to profit propellant VFX cow style. How to milk a cow? So, Atom Cortex is a Nook node, which I can show you right away. So, oh yeah, there you go. Nice to that is the node. All our nodes are probably the biggest contribution we did is this little button, the TFM button. You can instantly open the Nook manual, I mean our manuals from Nook. And this is an explanation of the node. So, anyway, it has two inputs. Let me go back to the thing. There are two inputs, an input for a procedural node, the Cortex input, and an input for a material. The node originally has no parameters. When you pipe in a Cortex procedural, it gets populated by parameter, and you can fine tune. To generate Python procedurals, you can well, we can use for Nuke, this Python module. And what we do is, when there is a script, we just basically load procedurals from a scan tab. I will show it in a video. So this is a tutorial for the web. I'm not going to show it. So before showing the video, let's show the video first. So there you go. Let me just. So basically, we have we load procedurals. This is like a polygon kind of wacky ball, and we can visualize it, change it various visualization modes, and this gets immediately rendered into Atom Render, which is our rendering node. So. Just work with any feature of AtomCraft. Now it's going to texture, and this is just a plain texture, of course. Let me just, since we are in a hurry, speed it up. So we can do, it interacts with any geometry. For example, now we're gonna like do a Boolean subtraction between Cortex object and a regular object. So that's it. And yeah, intersection stuff. So just to show that this works with any geometry in the system, and of course with any shading aspect. We have all these passes right available in the new viewer. I'm going to show this a little bit live. We can of course load as a SDS. There is a little flag for each procedural that can be marked as subdivision surface. So now actually this is going to be, it's not very long, so I'll just watch it fast. 41 speed. So it actually works with any kind of aspect of the renderer. Reflection, shadows, subsurface, channels, this subsurface, occlusion, and blah blah. So they said fast. So future that I'm going to also show it live. So future direction. Currently, Atom Cortex links statically with the Cortex libraries, so we plan to switch to dynamic linkage because there will be some problems if, like for example, engine head. So we want to switch to dynamic linking. Then there are other plausible future directions. Please choose just one. And then less plausible feature direction, switching to Git, please, switching to CMake, please, CMake, and yes, there is an opposite foundation. In our opinion, there are some parts of opposite foundation that could be integrated into Cortex. So, question and eventual answers. And no question, so I make a question myself. What is opposite foundation? So it's a modern portable C++ library with MIT license, so it's very permissive. And it has the emphasis on some things that are missing in Cortex, like random number generation, Monte Carlo, quasi-Monte Carlo sampling, KNN search, super fast actually, and a lot of other cool things. It's extensively used in all our projects, and it's distributed as a single pair of header file and source file, so no other external dependencies except, of course, STL. So kudos to John and Karsten for an invitation to this EOF, to Xing for his incredible good coding at the time, Moritz, the bloody German P.D. Möller, you probably know him very well, and then some other people like Luis Superbock Barrancos and François Franz and Dave the Legend and the rest of the crazy guys. And then, of course, to Aviles and the 3D team for their amazing renderer and pan-galactic support. That's it. That's all. No bugs for the army during this project. Though a lot were killed before. One more thing. We just released Applicator Beta 3. It's public. You can download it on the website. Just get it until the bugs are still.
I'm Ollie Rankin, supervising at Method. It's a little bit embarrassing to get up here after Karsten has already showed you guys that crowds are working in Cortex, and to tell you that we don't have crowds working in Cortex yet, but we're making some really good headway. I started at Method, or CIS as it was known at the time, a couple of years ago. We were working on Invictus, and the company had already had a couple of generations of a crowd system based around Massive. That's right. Colors aren't coming out very well. So this is a typical massive pipeline, nice, simple looking, well, oversimplified massive pipeline. Basically, there's some things that massive does quite well, especially behavioral animation, sort of emergent behavior, blended and synthesized animation. But then there's a lot of things that it doesn't do very well. It doesn't play very nicely with other software. It doesn't deal with standard file formats. It's not very scriptable, and it doesn't deal with procedural crowd layout very well either. These are all things that we were going to need on Invictus. So we did what I'm calling the biggest hack of all time. We decided that we wanted to use Houdini because Houdini is really good for building things procedurally. We wanted to be able to, we needed to put people in seats of a stadium, and it didn't seem like you needed any kind of intelligent crowd system to distribute people in the seats of a stadium. You knew exactly where those seats were. All you needed to do was to turn those seat positions into people. Then in order to be able to render those people, we built this thing we call the Mass BGO, which takes, it's a bridge between Massive and Mantra. And it basically, invokes the RenderMan DSO that ships with Massive, deduces the memory location of the geometry that's been deformed by that DSO, steals that straight out of RAM, turns it into the format of geometry that Houdini expects, and passes that on to Mantra for rendering. Which is obviously a very unstable, crazy idea. Anytime anything changes in Massive, that memory location is going to be different, and the whole thing comes crashing down. So we've been stuck on a version of Massive for a couple of years, and now we're stuck on a version of Houdini, and we're like, well, what we really need to be able to do is to remove that big scary black box and put in something more reliable, something more within our control, and something that can talk to other applications. So, because I knew that these guys were already making some headway in exactly that direction, we decided to use Cortex as the basis for this. So the first thing that we needed to do was to take all of our legacy Massive data and turn that into Cortex format. And then the next thing is to implement the render time procedural to produce the deformed geometry. To replace that Mass BGO plugin with a Cortex procedural. And the thing that's really exciting to me about that is that once we have that up and running, we can do this. We can replace any part of the pipeline with whatever software we think is most suitable. We can do our modeling, our animation, our behavioral simulation, our layout and rendering in absolutely any platform. So there's a vision of the future.
I'm Johannes Sam. I'm currently working at Fuel VFX in Australia as well, and we are probably the most recent addition to the Cortex family. Probably using it since 3 or 4 weeks. And I just give you a brief overview of what it means for us to get started with Cortex. So, because of time reasons, I'm going to skip the company branding and tell you a bit more about the situation right now at Fuel. Fuel used to be a smallish company that was mainly built around Windows and doing commercials, and it was very Maya based. And since a couple of years starts to grow and does more and more film work, and it's also we're starting to streamline our pipeline. The last department is now switching over to Linux, and it's going to grow. It's going to be one of those modern pipelines. And one of the biggest problems that we face is that suddenly we have all those applications and they need to talk to each other. We need to export geometry, we need to export cameras and all that stuff, and as we all know, FBX doesn't really do the trick. and we have to be platform independent, and also because of our lack of resources, we have to be very, very quick in developing those things, because our R&D departments consist of 2 guys, and if we start to build all those things from scratch, we will probably finish to redo our pipeline by 2015. The only implications, or the implications that Cortex had on our pipeline, and what we found with the heartbeat so far, were compiling for the first things. As anybody who has ever tried to start up with Cortex and has looked at the Cortex dev list, probably 98.2% of all threads there are about how do I compile this thing, and why doesn't it link with this, and what do I have to set in Houdini to make it work, and all that thing. But everything was very responsive, so we got it done at one point. And also, obviously, coming from a background where everything was based on one application and everything was very, very easy to create an environment, suddenly our environment started to be way more complex. So we had to, different boost versions for different versions of applications, different shows need to have different versions of Cortex and so on. So we had to come up with a solution for that on our end, but that's part of our new pipeline anyway. And obviously, because you introduce a new tool into your pipeline, you have to educate your TDs. The gains that we had so far in the last 3 to 4 weeks is that we have a solid base on our pipeline. This is actually, I don't know how long Cortex actually exists as image engine, that's why I couldn't put a number to it. 5 years. 5 years. So basically, you have a lot of other companies that have the code tested for you. You have support for free, and you have the development time for free. So far, we probably found 2 bugs in Cortex, and one of them was fixed overnight, and the other one was fixed in 2 weekends, I think. So the support was so far better than any application I've bought. Also, the development, if you find new things, you can discuss it with people on the list, and it's usually a very, very short turnaround to come up with new solutions. Our first tests so far have basically been around match caching, as we basically want to use Cortex as our base tool to interchange data from applications and all the way through the pipeline. We did a little comparison with Maya's new match caching and Cortex match caching, and we had up to 6 times faster speed, which was pretty crazy. And on the other hand, we were just testing it out, and the other day we lowered, I think, 7.5 million polygons in 3 seconds and stuff like that. So we were very pleased with the speed and with the performance that we were getting out of it so far. And very, very nice as well, because the caches are split up in the COP files, which contain the model, and then the VO files that actually contain the change in the geometry. Our huge 7.5 gig polygon mesh actually resulted in a cache of 17 megs on disk, which in a small company where you're constantly fight with obviously disk space issues and all that kind of stuff, you really appreciate that. And also, we had our first production problem where we had to break glass for a show that's not out yet officially. And so we had obviously changing point counts in the cache file because the glass was breaking, continuously fracturing out of Houdini, and we wanted to get it back into Maya for rendering. So I think in 20 minutes we had the first use of a Cortex op where we just used velocities that you get for free in a case like that to get it back into Maya and have it interpolated properly. So our first issue that we had was straight away solved in Cortex pretty quickly. So I'm just going to show you 2 quick movies of the match caching and speed that we were getting out of it from a movie which is called The Hunter, which is about to premiere at the Toronto Film Festival. And so this is a file scene for anybody who doesn't know what it is. It's a Tasmanian tiger, and it's running along. And let me just run it again. It's running at I don't know, like 5 or 6 frames a second with Maya's normal match caching. Then we switch to Cortex, and got about 50 frames a second. Obviously, when I recorded, I think it was 50 frames a second. If I played that demo on my computer, it's about around 70 frames a second. So we were really pleased in how it was performing so far. Our plans for how we're going to use Cortex at Fuel will be, obviously, as I told you, we're going to interchange all our data with it. We're going to try to educate more people to use it. As the new side of it so far is a little bit underdeveloped, as it just recently got added. But as you see, there's a lot of development going on in the nuke area anyway. We want to contribute to that as well. And as I was involved in the whole deep image compositing and that kind of stuff, we really want to add volumetrics and deep image support into Cortex, as the new shows that we're working on, like Prometheus, will really benefit from that kind of stuff. And so the only things I have to say is to the R&D team at Fuel, and you see it's quite small. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everybody. I think those case studies were quite interesting. I'm going to do a really short talk about where we'd like to go with Cortex in the future. One of the things you might notice from the talks is everyone's using 3D light rendering or Mantra. So adding some better support for the armor would be a good thing. It basically works, but it could be refined a lot. Adding more render backends would be great. Dealing with some of your handlers problems with building it seems quite important. Getting Windows builds, things like that. One of the problems with running this project is driven by production. So any time we put into it has to be justified by production. So some of these things which kind of benefit other people more than us are quite hard to get in there. So ideally, we'd like to kind of encourage more collaboration and get some free development back. I mean, we're just starting a new open source project as well. Goats instead of cows. Can't really say why. We're kind of thinking we've been developing all this software and using all these other applications as hosts, and quite often we're paying quite a lot of money to just use a viewport and then host our own software. So it sort of might make sense to develop a sort of native host for Cortex. This is super early days. It's like really rubbish. But
it's got a logo.
It's got a logo. So it's basically a little dependency graph built on top of Cortex. It's got the basics you need to build an application. All the files are Python scripts. Just like Cortex, the Python scripting is a direct binding to C++ API, so you don't want any other. And then for the first time, we've got some UI code out in the open source. It's just wrapping OpenGL Qt to build an interface on top of this. Like I said, it's rubbish. Here it is. So it's got what you kind of expect. It's like a splittable kind of UI concept and some really basic editors. You can make a plane. That's pretty cool. Sort of starting in the 80s and moving forwards. And then you can actually host ops and procedurals in the version that I've just tagged together at home. It's not quite in the repository yet. So here's Dan's Ocean toolkit being loaded and connected to this plane. So sure, should do. So although it's early days, because there's a lot of work going into Cortex, as soon as you place that in this application, you can actually do a few things. So you might have a better. We're actually developing it mainly at the moment to power this asset management system that we're building internally. It's kind of my sort of personal project to try and turn it into something more like a graph-like hospital. It's got no concept of time at all at the moment, so to animate it, I have to use the script. So if it stutters, it's because I wasn't hitting. So that's it really. That's about all it can do. It has a Google Code website. You're welcome to give it a go. I'd probably suggest don't give it a go just yet. But hopefully this is something you'll see some more of in the future. So here are the links you need if you want to take a look at Cortex. So Google Code website and then the developer list for discussion. I think we've got some good people here who will contribute to the discussions there, so get stuck in. I'd like to thank the management at IE and Dr. D in particular for letting us do this and for backing open source at all. I'd like to thank all the presenters for their great presentations. Thank you for coming.